This video is going to be a start to finish walkthrough of my oil painting, portrait, and figure study process. So I start, as I always do here, with a loose structural outline of the subject. And in this case, it's a woman in sitting position with her knees kind of folded up. The concept here is to try to get a natural figure pose, which is something that I've been practicing a lot over the last couple of months. So what I've started with here is a brown that's a mix of multiple colors, just trying to catch a middle value and hue of some of the colors for this piece. And it's thinned down with linseed oil so that it's a very loose paint that I can kind of scrape in and just sort of roughly position everything out. So the reason the looseness helps, in my opinion, is that I can pretty easily paint over it. Thicker, just regular oil paint is going to pretty easily cover over those pieces as I continue. So once I've got that basic outline down, I try to get some of the starting colors in there. Sometimes I shoot for different things. Sometimes it depends on the piece. There are times where I look for kind of a middle skin tone in terms of hue and light versus dark. Sometimes I go that direction. Sometimes I start with the dark though. In this case, I did sort of bounce around between a couple of those different concepts. I hit some dark spots and then I jumped into some different middle colors. Oftentimes I'm trying to find that middle based on adding yellow ochre, or adding cadmium red, or titanium white, or maybe I'll add some umber to try to push those colors in directions that I go to. I sometimes refer to the approach that I take as reverse color mixing almost. Rather than trying to pinpoint something that I see on the subject and matching that color, I'll sort of blend out some different colors and pick where those go. So like I'll blend something or I'll blend a couple of mixes and I'll just start trying to find spots in the subject where it makes sense to put that. That might be kind of a common approach for experienced painters. I don't really know, but that's an approach that I take pretty often. At this stage in the painting, I felt like I needed some darkness, particularly where the shade in the subject's hair was. One of the big concepts for this painting and really one of the points why I chose this and why I wanted to do this is I really wanted to practice very dark and very light spots. This is a concept that I've tried before with some very bright color or very bright light accents and some very, very dark spots. It's not always something that I do, but it can be fun to practice this. Fun to see where I need to kind of focus my efforts in terms of practice. Do I need to work more on developing my dark color mixes or work more on figuring out how to show bright light highlights? That's kind of a tricky thing sometimes. In this piece, some of the dark colors, I tried to mix raw umber with ultramarine blue to get my blackest blacks, and then bring more ultramarine blue where it needed to be kind of like a really dark bluish color, and then push more towards the umber if it needed to be more black or more kind of brownish black. I also mixed the ultramarine blue with burnt umber to try to get a different color of dark. And then I also tried, and I think this was a little less successful, I tried using phthalo blue with raw umber to see what kind of black I could get from that. And that's something that I had never really tried before. I'm pretty new to phthalo blue, even though I've been painting for about a year and a half. I just got my first tube of phthalo blue probably about 3 weeks or a month ago. So I've been experimenting with it, trying to see what phthalo blue can do compared to ultramarine blue. That's been kind of fun to play around with. I've been doing a lot of water scenes just so I could test out those different blues. So in this case, phthalo blue mixed with umber, I didn't really like. It was still too bright. Phthalo blue is really powerful, and it didn't seem to mix as well with the browns, which I think is something that I had read before. I think I had read that phthalo blue was good to mix with greens rather than browns. I don't know how much validity there is to that, but I certainly found in this experiment that ultramarine blue definitely played better with umber in terms of trying to get blacks or really dark blues. Again, this project was trying to get really dark in certain places and trying to play with different types of dark colors. In the background, I started with just raw umber. I tried to get some brown highlights, and then I started adding some purple mixes. I went with Alizarin crimson mixed with ultramarine blue to try to get a nice dark purple, and I mixed a little umber in that as well to try to really darken that purple up. And then I put that highlight in different places here to try to get a little bit different of a color impression, because I didn't want it to match the dark blues in the clothing. I also wanted the dark brown in the hair to look different too. So that's kind of the name of the game here, is I wanted different darks. So I think I was able to achieve that, which is nice. So I've got the dark purples in the backgrounds, I've got the dark blues in the clothing, and I've got the dark browns in the hair. So that was my goal, and trying these different mixes I think was successful from that point. And I didn't want the darkness in the skin to also be the same. I wanted to mix that up a little bit too. So leaning on kind of a burnt umber mix with some of those flesh tones I think helped as well. So I got a little bit different of a look where I wanted, and I wanted to be able to highlight certain areas of light reflection. Kind of the concept is towards the bottom of the subject, we've got some light, and then we've also got some reflection in certain areas of the subject. So one of the things that I sometimes fail to do is plan very well. Sometimes my paintings, I just kind of dive in and start painting, and I don't leave areas blank for light. Sometimes that catches me into a little bit of a trap, because once you've got a really dark color on, you can recover, you can wipe it off with a paper towel, or really layer on a lot more paint to try to get the light to come back out. But sometimes that's hard to do, and it requires a lot of effort. So I really made a conscious effort with this painting to leave certain sections completely blank. That way I could do the darkness around those blank sections and then highlight the bright light reflections as appropriate. So I was able to do that here. I left the hair in particular on the left side of the painting. I left that completely blank. That way I was able to get some nice light highlights. I added some cadmium yellow, a little cadmium red, some really bright mixes, titanium white, of course, just some pure titanium white there to really show that light reflection. Another thing, so I like the way the light reflection turned out. Another thing that I like too is I think the folds in the clothing worked out pretty well, so that's kind of nice. Natural folds of clothing has been a point of emphasis a little bit, so I was glad that worked out. So that is all I have for this walkthrough. This was just kind of a figure study, as I mentioned, light and dark, trying to really emphasize that, show what I've learned in terms of showing those reflections. I think a pretty solid effort. If anyone has any questions or wants to talk about any concepts related to this, as always, I love having conversations in the comment section, so definitely sound off. Love to hear from you. Regardless, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. I hope to see you for the next video.